YouTube takes a minute to connect. Oh, there we go. We are online.
This is Andrea Yount. We are preparing for Therapy Thursday, our weekly broadcast on mental health topics. Therapy Thursday is brought to you by Affinity Counseling Services and A Lovely Pause. This is a test.
Affinity Counseling Services is located in Piggott, Arkansas and Kennett, Missouri. We currently have 4 therapists in our office and are taking new clients. If you want to join our sign-up sheet, visit counselingwithaffinity.com. And to find out more, you can call me, Kindred, at 870-324-5122 or 573-840-0440. Thank you.
A Lovely Pause is a local nonprofit created to provide community education, awareness, coping skills, and support for those with PTSD and other trauma-related disorders. June is PTSD Awareness Month, and this month we are featuring our Fear Response Worksheet. Find out what the 4 fear responses are, what their functions are, and what happens when they become overused. Use our reflection section to become more aware of your fear responses in various situations. Sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on our fundraising progress, current and upcoming events, exclusive freebies, and more. Sign up at alovelypause.com.
All right, are we good?
You're good if you're ready, Freddie.
All right, I will start the intro.
Therapy Thursday normalizes discussing mental health topics in a safe, supportive environment because not being normal is normal. Hey everybody, this is Andrea Yount. I am the Vice President here at Affinity Counseling Services and the Chairman of the Board for A Lovely Pause. We are here today for our Therapy Thursday broadcast, our weekly broadcast on mental health topics from a professional and personal perspective. And we are here today, it's just us girls. So if y'all want to introduce yourselves.
I am not behind the camera, as unusually. And I am the office manager here at Affinity and the secretary of the board for A Lovely Pause.
I'm Jillian. I am the intern here at Affinity, and I'm glad to be with y'all today.
So today we're going to be talking about, PTSD Awareness this month because June is PTSD Awareness Month. And today we're going to be discussing the physical effects of PTSD, and it's just going to be us. And so I think this is a great topic for us to have to handle on our own because I think we can handle it. I think we can do this one on our own anyways. We're informed enough about this decision or this topic. And Jillian is our intern, and she is working on getting her master's degree in social work right now. So she's going to be our professional perspective today. So so we're talking about the physical effects of PTSD. And that's one thing that I really like to talk about a lot because that's basically what I do for a living. I help people learn how to calm down their body and their physical effects so that they can pay attention to what's going on in their mind. And I do that on just a surface level right now. But I'm very interested in that type of stuff, and that's called somatic experiencing or somatic type therapy. So if you hear us mentioning somatic therapy or somatic experiencing, that's what that is. It's being aware of your physical self and trying to calm your physical self so that you can connect with your thoughts and what's going on mentally. So I don't think we have anything to talk about. I think we're going to be in the 4th of July parade.
Yes.
That's one thing we've got to talk about today.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah, that what's coming up for us, for Affinity. We're going to be in the 4th of July parade, and we'll probably be in some more parades, and we've got a really cool idea. So if you're going to be around for the 4th of July, look for us there. We'll be having some candy and some cool stuff to give you. But I think that's really pretty much all of our announcements that we have for today. Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll go ahead and get into the topic. Jillian, I know you did a little bit of research. You want to start off on something that you thought was really interesting, having to do with the physical effects of PTSD.
Okay, so Andrea shared a TED Talk with me I'm sure you'll talk a little bit
Yeah.
more about it. But a piece of it that I thought was interesting, it compared the physical effects as like seeing a bear in the forest. So your flight or fright starts in, and your brain starts like contacting each other part, and it's on that like rise. And so it said PTSD is like when that bear comes home with you. It's always on that rise, connecting, and you're like always just like heightened, and you're like,
Always
You're
afraid the bear's
up.
going to attack you.
yes.
Yeah.
So it wears you out physically, and there's where some of the physical effects comes in. I wrote some down. This is definitely not every single one.
Right.
But some are increased blood pressure and heart rate, fatigue, muscle tension, nausea, joint pain, headaches, back pain. I mean, terrible. More the physical pain. Oh, here it is. Physical pain can serve as a reminder of the trauma.
Yes. And so, and that's one thing that I was going to talk about too, is like, a lot of times, and we've talked about it on the show before, the physical and mental holding that we do. So we're repressing those memories or repressing those emotions that we don't want to think about. So not only are we holding them down, suppressing them in our memory, but we're holding them in with our body. We're tightening our body. We're squeezing our chest or crossing our arms or crossing our legs or putting some type of physical restraint on it as well. And we're holding our breath. We're doing all these things that are connected to these thoughts. And so anytime we have those physical sensations, we remember and are trigger those mental sensations.
Yeah, you talk about your stance all the time.
Yeah,
How you're like kind of closed off.
Yes.
So that being in that physical like closed off state, I mean, that has a effect on you.
Yes, it does, because it pulls your whole back down.
I'm 90% sure that fainting isn't very good for my heart.
No. Kindred and a few other people I know, when they get when they get 10 to anxiety, they're just out. They just pass out. Your body can't handle it. They just shut off for a minute. They can't handle it. So it's very overwhelming.
It's exhausting after it happens.
Oh, I
too.
bet. Yeah.
Like I'm done, spent for the rest of the day.
And so those we unintentionally and subconsciously hold on to these physical holdings, these physical sensations, or these physical things that we do in order to hold down our memories, the trauma, the emotions that we don't want to deal with. And that's why coping skills like exercise, breath work, yoga, all those somatic experiences. Somatic means your body, connecting your body with your mind. And so all those somatic experiences, using those to kind of just relax your body, helps your mind to kind of be able to process a little bit better when you are trying to not hold those in anymore, when you're trying to get those out. And a lot of times people who have experienced complex trauma, they've been doing it for so long, they don't even recognize, a lot of us don't recognize that we're doing it, but people who have complex trauma have been doing it for so long that, like I've said before, they could just open up their hands and put their hands by their side and just break out bawling because it's such a physical thing for them as much as a mental thing.
And like you've said before, once they get into that yoga environment, you're kind of pushing them to do stuff that might be super uncomfortable, but maybe even laying on the floor.
Yes, and exactly, because savasana, or just laying flat on the floor, is actually people find that the hardest. That's one of the hardest poses that people find. They can't lay still. Kindred's that way. She's like, okay, we're done now. Let me get up. No, it's that savasana is supposed to be 10% of your practice, because you're supposed to lay there a long time. And people don't want to do that. They're like, oh, I got to move. I got to do something. And that's why. It's because a lot of people, if they're sitting still, and some of it's ADHD too, like, your ADHD but it helps with that, because it forces you to turn that off and not pay attention to those anxieties or those things I need to do next or whatever. So, and that's really good, because that sleeps in your body and you don't even know it. It just makes its home there. And, a lot of times people have been doing this, like I say, complex trauma, they've been doing it since they were a child. They've been holding these things in, or they've been having these reactions or suppressing these memories or these emotions since they were a kid, especially kids who have childhood trauma. the TED Talk that you were talking about earlier. It's over ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences, and they call them ACEs in the medical world because they're trying to develop a way, and one doctor already has developed a way to assess the adverse childhood experiences that a child is having in the moment. And it's really hard because if you think about it, these children are going into the doctor with their parents, who most likely are the people who are hurting them in the first place or traumatizing them somehow in the first place. Not always, but a lot of times that's the case. And so it's really difficult. But at the same time, it's really important, because if you can get a child's ACE scores and start working on that young and figuring out how to help them control their physical reactions and heal from that younger, then they won't have as much physical problems in the future. Yeah. And what she says in that TED Talk is that adverse childhood experiences increase your risk for 7 out of the 10 leading causes of death in the U.S. So 7 out of the 10 leading causes. It said that pulmonary disease, 2.5 times more risk, hepatitis, 2.5 times more risk, depression, 4.5 times more risk, suicide, 12 times more risks. And if they have 7 or more ACEs in their ACE score, they're 3 times the risk of having lung cancer, lung disease, and ischemic heart disease, which is the number one, or ischemic, I think, ischemic. That's what it is, I think. So, ischemic heart disease, which is the number one killer in the United States.
Yeah, I thought that suicide was one of the top ones.
Yeah, I mean, and people were like, oh, well, that makes sense, because if you're growing up in a traumatic experience or a traumatic environment, you're going to be growing up in more high-risk situations. You're going to be having more high-risk behavior as you're growing. You're going to be more susceptible to that, so that makes sense that you would be more susceptible to, you're going to be doing drugs, alcohol. They're going to be doing those more high-risk things. So people are going to be like, oh, that makes you more susceptible to all of these things. Yes and no. Because even if someone doesn't engage in high-risk behavior, they're still 3 times more likely to get these diseases because of the way that it affects their nervous system. And that's what that's affecting. Yeah. So it doesn't matter about, it does matter. The drugs and alcohol make it that much worse, right? Mm-hmm. So...
Not to mention, like, if you get depressed, and you get laid up in bed not taking care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That has long-term effects.
Yes, and that just compounds it all. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I wrote down there is generally 4 types of PTSD symptoms. There's intrusive memories, avoidance, negative changes in thinking and mood, and changes in physical and emotional reactions. So the changes in physical and emotional reactions is like being easily startled and frightened, being on guard all the time, self-destructive behaviors, trouble sleeping, trouble concentrating, irritability, anger outbursts, and aggressive behaviors, overwhelming guilt or shame.
Yes. Yeah. And so all of that are just symptoms from this, which are going to exacerbate any type of health issue that you're going to come in contact with. And it's funny, and I've talked about this before as well on here, but when I was going through my yoga certification, our instructor had us watch a video of an impala who was being eaten alive or chewed on alive by a jaguar or tiger. I don't remember exactly what it was, some type of big cat. And the impala was being chewed on, like his neck. He was just chewing on his neck, and the impala was still alive. And so the impala, it was in his fight or flight had turned on, right? So he was in fawning mode. He was, or freezing. I don't know. He was just like playing dead pretty much. He was like, I'm in shock. I'm dead right now. And so he's just being chewed on, and he thinks he's dying. Well, then something happens, and the jaguar or the cat gets run off, and the impala is okay, and he's not sustained any horrible injuries or anything. So he's just sitting there for a minute after the cat gets up and goes away, and his whole body just starts trembling, like shaking like crazy. And he does that for a very long time. And, you know, like when we go through an experience, I don't know if you guys have ever had the experience where afterwards it's been traumatic and then afterwards you're just uncontrollably shaking. And we try to calm that down. We try to suppress that. And then we don't talk about the emotions that we're feeling, and we try to just hold all that in. Well, what animals do is they stay there and they let all that out. And they go through that and release all of that trauma from their nervous system. We don't do that. We try to suppress it. And suppressing it actually damages our nervous system.
And then you'll shake for no reason.
So right. Then you're going to be shaking and you can't help it. No, sometimes we'll do that. Not always. But yeah, so I mean, it's like we instinctively or I don't know, socially taught, or yes, the ego. We try to push that down and be like, oh, we're fine, and we don't allow our nervous system to go through the process of getting that damage out of there, that shock out of our system. So
one of the things on here was the trouble sleeping. And I know you've talked about that.
Yeah, I actually had trouble sleeping last night. We had been doing laundry, and I had just finished our bed sheets, and Matt had some jeans that he hadn't told me he needed washed, that he wanted washed for his class that he was teaching today. And so he went ahead and washed them. And it was time to put them in the dryer at the time I was ready to go to sleep. And I don't know if I've mentioned before, but one of the traumas that I lived through was my house caught on fire in the middle of the night, 2:00 in the morning, and my stepdad just happened to wake up and see the flames in the living room, and we had to rush through fire to get out the front door, and my mom went back in and almost didn't make it back out. And so, like, you know, it was a lot. The fire was scary, especially at night when I'm sleeping. That's something that triggers me. I unplug. I don't do it as bad as I used to, but I don't leave my toaster plugged in. I don't leave my hair dryer plugged in. I unplug things because it was an electrical fire.
Yeah.
Our dryer had also caught on fire one time. It wasn't a big deal, but it had done the same thing. Yeah. I don't like running the dryer at night.
I could see that.
And if I'm, you know, going to sleep. And he needed to run it, and I had a really hard time. I just laid there and listened to the dryer turn and turn and turn and turn and turn. And he made a good point. Okay, I had been there all day. I'd been running the dryer all day. I'd been back in my room with the door shut, with the TV on. I couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
We have a fire alarm in our laundry room.
It's just the night.
It's just the fact that I would be asleep and out of control of myself, and that's an OCD thing, which comes from trauma.
Yes.
And so it comes from that trauma of the fire. And so, yeah, I mean, it really, I just sit there and think, and I have to pray, or I have to like breathe or whatever to get myself to calm down to be able to go to sleep.
Wendy says she unplugs her dishwasher because that's what caused both of their fires.
I don't blame you, Wendy. I would also.
Yes.
If that had caused anything that had caused the fire, it's going to be unplugged.
Well, the sleeping also has to do with a lot that we talk about, the EMDR therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, processing. Yes. And yes, you talk more on that. Go ahead.
So I get to sit in on many of Matt's sessions, if the client is comfortable, of course.
Yes.
And see the process of EMDR therapy, which replicates rapid eye movement, which y'all don't get a lot of.
No.
Which processes memories and puts them where they're supposed to be.
I have a watch that measures my rapid eye movement, my REM sleep, and I get about 6% a night, which normal REM sleep is about 25 to 30%, and I get about 6.
So the lacking of that, we get to pull up those traumatic memories and kind of just like process them correctly.
Yes.
Because they don't get to do that during the night, and it's awesome to watch. It really is.
If my brain would just do it at night, I wouldn't have to be awake when it happens.
I know, right?
I'm like, that sounds... Do it at night, brain.
I also found this thing about trauma blocking behavior.
Okay.
So it looks like excessive use of social media and compulsive mindless scrolling.
Yeah, dissociation.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Binge drinking every weekend because you're off from work. These are just examples. Excessive and mindless eating even when you're not hungry. Compulsive exercising to reach a goal you're never satisfied with. Being uncomfortable, being alone, resulting in staying in toxic relationships long after their expiration date. The feeling of being uncomfortable if you have nothing to do and the need to always have projects to do, compulsive online shopping for things you do not need and going into debt, becoming a workaholic and having poor boundaries at work, including being available 24/7.
Yeah. So you mentioned exercising excessively. And there's another one you mentioned. Let me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let me see which one. The exercising excessively one. Think about that, okay? When you exercise, we say exercise is a good coping skill, but too much of anything is bad,
Exactly.
right? So why do you think people over exercise when they have trauma?
You don't do that, do you?
No,
Okay.
I hate exercising. I hate it so much, but I do it. But I can
imagine-
understand it. I can understand why people would do it. Okay.
Does it have to do with control?
I mean, I feel like there's a few different reasons.
There's probably a few different reasons. I feel
It
like
could
it could be control.
It could be control. It could also be like a form of self-harm.
It could be that.
Yeah,
because
it did.
Yeah.
It did state that. Where did it
A goal that you're never gonna be
Yes.
satisfied with.
Yes.
It
Also, a distraction.
It's also a distraction, form of dissociation, but it's also a dopamine boost. And so I think that's the right chemical. One of those. I think it's a
Yeah,
dopamine boost.
one of
It
those.
does.
And
It does
and so it's a
that.
dopamine boost, and people will.
Like you've heard of the runner's high, right?
Right.
People get
People-
addicted to that.
Yeah.
Well, especially people who have trauma because they're or who
I
have
like running.
who experience depression.
Yeah.
They will chase that dopamine
That was
boost.
a piece out of that TED Talk. It talked about the reward system.
Yes,
Of
yeah.
your brain. So there it is.
You can and you can abuse that reward
Yes.
system. You can get because you're not used to that. You want to do it over and over again, and then it's temporary. You're supposed to get that for a temporary boost and then continue on with that. But people just want to keep some people just want to
Yeah.
keep going over and over again and abusing that dopamine boost. Also, the same thing with excess comfort food. That's what that is. It's giving you that boost that makes you feel good for the moment, and you're going to keep doing it
because it's not enough
because
ever.
no, it's not ever going to be enough because you're trying to fill that void with exercise or food or whatever, your boyfriend, I
Yep.
mean, just whatever. I mean,
No, it's
really,
true,
all
yeah.
these things. And so these things that can give you that boost, people can get addicted to that. That is one thing that can happen. And that's also can have detrimental effects. Matt has talked about how people becoming overdosed on those things is not good.
Yeah.
You get overdosed on those things, it's not good. And it's not good to compulsively do things to try to make yourself feel better. You want something that's going to work, that's, going to satisfy you in the long run.
Like therapy.
Right, like therapy, like creating a support system.
Yes.
And therapy has helped me to create a support system. Finding one person that was supportive has helped me find more people that were supportive. So I know it's hard to find people who are supportive, but it's about changing who you're always with. I'm not saying you have to completely stop hanging out with the people that you hang out with. Sometimes you might need to, but changing people that you're around so that you can also get this other perspectives and hear these more supportive things, and maybe you can give back to the other people that you're around who don't know how to do that.
Yeah, and sometimes the people that, if you don't want to get those new people, they just need educated
Yes. Yeah.
with seeing those physical
Yes.
effects and knowing kind of what's going on up here. I mean, they don't have to know exactly, but just a small idea. I mean, a couple came in the other day and Matt did just some education, just
Yes.
simple stuff. And he's like, okay,
Right. It helps them to, because a lot of people aren't trauma informed, and it's a new thing to be trauma informed. And so coming into therapy can help you become trauma informed for your own self, and then it can help you inform other people and help them to understand you a little bit better. And you, like Jillian said, you can bring them into therapy with you to have it explained more professionally, and have a guide. But a lot of these things come from us a lot of these physical things come from us not expressing these emotions, this stress or this shock or whatever, this trauma that we have in the appropriate time. And especially people who have had it from childhood. I mean, any type of trauma is going to harm your nervous system. It's going to do harm to your physical health. But anybody who's had complex trauma, has had trauma from childhood, that is going to be that much more complex. And I have a quote here from Dr. Robert Block, who is the former president of the American Academy for Pediatrics. And it says, adverse childhood experiences are the single unaddressed public health risk facing the nation today. So, I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, I think, especially with everything that we have that's public health. But I would have to agree on some point, because having recognized how many people have adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah, that they haven't processed really.
Exactly, that they don't even recognize as trauma.
It's just their normal.
Yes.
They're stuck in that fight or flight.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and they don't know any different.
Yeah.
And so just the being able to be aware of that alone, I mean, then it could change a lot of people's lives if we could figure out a system within the medical field to be able to help and assess this and catch it early.
Maybe even like the education field, you know?
Right, yeah, like the teachers and get them involved with ACEs and things like that. And, you know, they're already mandatory reporters. But taking that a step further to where they're trauma informed and they know how to do ACE assessments, or they know how to recognize a child who might need an ACE assessment at the very least.
Or even in high school health classes, like
They don't talk about mental health and health
No, they
classes.
don't.
Unless you take a specific like psychology class that's like an elective.
but not everyone
You're not
gets
gonna
that.
learn
I think
anything.
that as a child who was traumatized and did not speak about her trauma until I was in my mid-20s, if I had someone teach me about mental health or emotional support or anything
Yes.
like, or trauma in high school, middle school, I would have said something a lot sooner.
Yeah, yeah, same. Like
Because you feel like you're alone, probably.
You
but then
definitely
you have
feel
all
like
of
you're
your,
alone.
Yeah.
in high school. That could be a setting where you're like have all your peers also talking about that, and you don't
Yes.
feel so lonely, and you feel normal and
Yeah.
stuff.
Right.
This stuff it can go unknown. Like, if someone has a broken leg, everyone can see that. You got stuff going on up here. Nobody
Well,
knows,
and sometimes
really.
it's noticeable. And I did have
Yeah.
people, talk to me about, sexual abuse. And then you need
Yeah.
the normal things, like you need to tell people, you need to stay away. But then when they're saying these things, like here I was being like, oh, well, this is going on at my house. I don't want to be the one to be like, oh, this is, you know what I mean? It made me feel like I didn't want to speak out. But if I had been more educated on how it would affect you, how, that type of
later
stuff,
on.
instead of just the warnings, having more of the education is what I mean. I would have, I feel like I would have felt like I had someone who understood that I could talk to more about it, because that was a really difficult, you do feel like you're alone because you don't understand why you're so different from everyone else.
Yeah, and you don't understand, hey, this might be happening to other people
Exactly.
as well.
Yeah. So one more thing. I mean, we're almost done. I think we did a pretty good job. We're almost. I thought we were going to be cutting it short, but I wanted to say one more thing: is that trauma doesn't discriminate.
No.
And in this TED Talk, and just by the way, this TED Talk was done by Nadine Burke Harris, and it's called "How Childhood Affects Health Across a Lifetime." It's one of my favorite ones. But anyways, it's trauma doesn't discriminate, and that original ACE study was conducted. I forget when it was when they did it, but she says I think it was in the 90s. And 70% of those people were white, and 70% of them were college educated, and they still had really high ACE scores. So, anyways, I just thought that was interesting, because we think, oh, well, it's just poor people, or it absolutely is poorer people, and they're going to be way more susceptible to it, but it's everyone. Everyone, it doesn't discriminate. And so somatic therapy, somatic experiences, taking care of your body, doing yoga, eating the right foods even, feeling clean, because think about after you eat a burger or after you eat something that's really just thick in grease and bread and heavy.
Makes me
you
feel sick.
"Ugh."
Yeah.
Yeah, and so just anything that to do with your body is going to help you be able to mentally process out the things that you need to process a whole lot easier. And I know that Matt, doing EMDR, he does the processing with the eye movement, but he adds somatic experiencing into that.
Yes.
He adds that into, okay, How does your shoulders feel?
Yeah.
How take
Where
a
do you
big
feel
deep
it?
breath. Where are you feeling this at? Send your breath to your sides or whatever. And so that's really great. And yoga is really great for that. The type of yoga that I do, I try to guide you in a way that can help you connect your breath to be able to create space in your body and connect that to what you're thinking in the moment. So like if you're in a plank and you're really frustrated that you're in a plank, we will talk about that. And like, okay, why are you frustrated? You're in a plank. Not really. We don't really go into that. But I help guide you through that and find ease in those things so that you can better be observant of your thoughts.
Yeah.
So I guess that is our Therapy Thursday for today. And thank you for watching us. And I guess we'll be back again next week.
We will.
So if you, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go. You go. I don't.
So if you would like to sign up for to be a client for Affinity, you can go to counselingwithaffinity.com. And you could call Kindred at 870-324-5122 for Piggott, or 573-840-0440 for the Kennett office. And you can find us at alovelypaws.com.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.